Hello, everyone. I'm just need to accept everyone into this. Give me a minute to accept everybody. All right, we'll get started. I will just admit people as they hop in. So I wanted to go over kind of like what you need to do in order to get ready for a listing slash questions that you should be asking your seller when you go to their house to meet them. So let me share my screen real quick. So I obviously, as I'm sure everybody does, likes to come prepared. So what I do is I will already have done my research on the house. So let's say they call me, give a scenario. They say, Ryan, hey, I got your phone number from a friend of yours, and I would like for you to come over and tell me what you think about my house slash put it on the market here pretty soon. And I always say, of course. And I ask for their address. Obviously, I need to know where I'm going to meet them. And then the other purpose is I want to obviously start doing some research on their house. Now, I'll kind of walk y'all through what I do, and maybe it'll make sense to you, maybe it won't. But what I do is I give myself, I tell them, okay, when do you want to meet? And they say, when they usually kind of leave it up in the air. So I'll kind of pin a day, maybe 2, 3 days out, because I want to, of course, I'm busy with other stuff, and I want to give myself some time to do some research on their house. So when I pull up the address, I go into HAR and I pull up the tax records. And then I also will go and look up history of the home. Has it been listed before and for what? And then I'll go ahead and run some comps in the neighborhood. We won't go into depth because this is not a CMA class today, but I will at least get myself an idea. I'll go to Google Maps and I'll look at their house from Google Maps. So I have a kind of an idea of what it looks like from the outside. And what I'll do though is I don't give them an information of anything to do with value, because I tell them, and when I sit down with them, the first question they ask me is how much is it worth? I think people have this almost misconception that we can just kind of like, and that maybe that's a good thing that we come across as we're very knowledgeable, but I can't price anything unless I see it, right? I can't even, unless it's maybe a car that there's 2,000 of, but I tell them, hey, every car is unique. Sorry, every house is unique, unlike cars. So I need to I need to see your house first. And then even at the end of the tour, because when I walk in, I of course ask them to show me the house. I even tell them after that, if I still don't am confident about what kind of price we should pin, I say, look, guys, let me do some research on this and let me get back to you now that I've seen your house. And they'll usually accept that answer. In other words, don't just fumble off something prematurely just because you think that you're the professional, so you should have all the answers. They can understand that we need to do research, and B, we need to see their house if you explain it correctly. Now, what I do is I go ahead and sit down with them and I get some things out the way, legwork things out the way. So back that up. I might, if I feel comfortable and I've done all my research and it's about what I was expecting, because I kind of looked at his photos of the history before, then I will go ahead and start discussing comps with them. And then sometimes they'll give me a suggestion and I'll say, I mean, okay, it sounds good to me. Let's rock and roll. But regardless, I want to sit down and I want to get some information from them, because there's a lot of reasons why I do this, and I'll go into that. It's mostly to do with covering your backside. So my next thing that I do is I say, okay, let's go ahead and sit down and let's talk about your house, and let's fill out this form that I have everybody fill out. So don't act like it's just them, right? You don't want to put them into some sort of tunnel vision or into some sort of box. So all my clients do this. And secondly, these two checklists I'm about to show you is really good, so you can kind of have an idea of how you need to start this process. Okay, because obviously the listing agreement comes next, but you need to know their names. I get it, you can pull that off of tax records, but sometimes their names are incorrect on tax records. So first, that was just kind of a foreshadowing. Let me get through this right here. Can everybody see my screen? If you can't, just raise your hand or unmute yourself. Thank you. By the way, if you have a question, I absolutely do not care you interrupting me and asking me the question. I do not care at all. You'll just have to unmute yourself and or raise your hand on the little screen there, and I will be more than happy to answer questions along the way. I do not mind. I will do a Q&A at the end. But anyway, I'm moving on because I know that your time is important. So let's see. Helpful tips. Fernando would just like everybody to know that you should be receiving emails from our brokerage. And if you're not, it might be going into your spam. And there's some tips that you can follow depending on what your email is. But the company does send out emails, so you guys should be getting them. If you're not, there's probably an issue somewhere. The company also wants to know that you should join the private Facebook group. If you don't have that already, you can scan that with your phone right now. Just open up the pictures on your, if you have an iPhone. I don't know any other products because all I do is iPhone stuff and Apple. But if you open up the camera app and you just point the camera at it, the QR code should pull up if you hold it steady. Okay, I'll come back to this at the very end, just in case. Okay, and we have a conference, September 10th through the 12th at Walt Disney World. That's our company does a conference every year, and it's at Walt Disney World, September 10th through the 12th. If you need more information on that, you can get with our broker, Carol, or Amy, our office manager, or anybody at the office for that matter. Okay, so let's go over the new listing checklist. So that when I sit down with them, I say, okay, let's fill this out. You know, sometimes the wife wants to fill it out. Sometimes I'll fill it out and ask them for the information. Usually my handwriting isn't very good, so I usually have the lady of the house do it. Who is in ownership of the property? So that would be Mr. and Mrs. But I had a situation recently where the actual the Mr. and Mrs. were on the deed, but so was the father of the husband. So those are important things to ask, because you want all three names on the listing agreement, don't you? Every party, every owner to the party, to the house, the property. Sorry, guys, it's been a long day for me. So anyways, make sure you get anybody and everybody who has ownership of that property. Okay. Their marital status, you know, I'm getting some of these questions could be maybe awkward depending on the situation, but you need to know, because the title companies are going to need to know that information, because it's going to be a big deal on who needs to come to the closing and sign off on that. So, if married before or after the purchase. So that's a big important question, because if you were married when you purchased the property, and even if you separated after, it's probably still going to have that X's unless they've changed the deed since then, a signature at closing. So it's better to tackle these things up front rather than having to track down somebody, you know, the day of closing. So that's why these questions are asked. There's a reason for this. Okay. By the way, I'll show you at the end who I got this from. I'll show it to you right now. I got this checklist from Holly over there at WFG National Title. She was gracious enough to send me this. By the way, if you want to take a picture, of this information right here, Holly. She will be glad to give you any kind of information you need, marketing information. She gave me this checklist. She has apps that will help you with your sellers. It's pretty cool stuff. And she's more than happy to give that to you for free, by the way. If divorced, so obviously they want to know that I just said that they'll need to know the X and what county, because it could be where if they haven't changed the deed since, then the ex-wife may have to sign off on that at closing if they bought it while they were both married. Okay, this is for lawyers and title companies to decide. This is just for you to fill out. They may ask, hey, well, yeah, I did buy it when I was married before. What's that mean to me? It's borderline a legal question there. You really should just say, look, let me send this information to the title company and I'll get you that answer. Okay. Okay, if widowed, another great question. If it was it's an estate sale, that's a whole new ball of wax. But if they have the property as a result of a death, then you need to. The title company will ask questions like, "Has the will?" And that's coming up. Has the will been probated? Is there a will? And if not, there will have to be an affidavit of heirship. And all that the title company can help you with. I'm doing that right now with the transaction where there was a will, but it's being probated, and the title company is helping me talk to the attorney about what certain things that are needed. So I'm having kind of me in the middle with the attorney, the probate attorney, and the title company helping me out, and so I can put this house on the market. And if there is no will, it's a little more difficult. And I would definitely get with your title company about that. And your question, well, Ryan, I don't have a title company. There's no executed contract, so I haven't open title. I understand that, but you can get with the local title company or a title company that you are familiar with and ask them to go ahead and prep the file. And oftentimes they'll go ahead and pre-open the title. I know it costs them money, I think, to do that, but oftentimes they will do that for you, especially if it's a little bit of a complicated one. And in this particular one, my probate deal, they've already pre-opened title and they're already helping me, and I don't even have it on the market yet. Okay. So is this a homestead property? That's important. The title company wants to know that. They want to make sure that if there's a homestead exemption on it, then they need to prepare the taxes. But usually they'll find out the tax office anyway. It's just good for them to know that it's their homestead. And usually if it's the homestead and they're married, regardless if the wife's on the deed or not, she'll still have to sign at the closing. Again, this is prepping the file. Okay. Manufactured home. I mean, you could answer that when you go out there and look at the property. Important information like lien holders, that's the lender. Of course, they need to know the loan number and the contact, because the title company is eventually going to need to order the payoff, correct? Because they're the ones responsible for paying off that loan at closing and then giving the rest of the proceeds over after everybody's divvied out their share. So of course they're going to want to, and oftentimes my seller says, I know how much my loan balance is. I don't care if they just called and found out how much their loan balance is. The title company will pull that again, because their loan balance, it won't be exactly perfect, because for some reason there's a little bit of a difference between when they call it in and the final loan balance at the very end, because I think the bank wants the interest to the very last breath is what I know. Have you filed for loan forbearance? Remember during COVID when they had the kind of people were filing for a delay in payment? That's good for them to know, because they will probably have to pay that back at closing, or whatever they were behind on at closing, depending on the lender and the situation. A threat of foreclosure, awkward question, but if not, just simply hit no and move on. If it is, I used to do short sales. That's a whole nother another class that we would have to get into. Mineral rights, usually in the city at least, the mineral rights are not even owned by the current owner, but that would be a better question for like country properties. Unpaid judgments against you. I mean, awkward question, but again, sometimes there might be a judgment on them to where if they sell their property, then that person gets X amount of dollars if they have a judgment on them. It's rare, but it's happened before. Property taxes, are they current? I mean, the title company will find out anyway, but that's a good question for them to know up front. All these things are so the title company can get the file prepared correctly. Okay. I'm going to get to some really important things here in a minute, including an HOA question that I got asked just the other day. Are there any leases, or believe it or not, guys, I wonder why I come into all these wonderful situations. Believe it or not, I had a condo listing where there was an oral lease. Don't get me started on that one. That's the reason I've got a headache. Contractors, yeah, if contractors owe money, you owe contractors money, then there could be a lien on the property. The title will pull what's called a title commitment and check that, but they're asking these questions up front, so they're get all the information they can. Of bankruptcy, of course, if they need to know that. I haven't really dealt with bankruptcy, so I don't really know a whole lot about that. I know it could affect transitioning or selling your property. Yeah, just the lease. I'll give y'all the rundown on it. There was a lease, and the owner told me that he had a copy of the lease and he would get it to me. Now, remember, when you sell that property, the lease doesn't just die. It continues with the new property owner. You can't just kick the tenant out. Okay. Well, and you need to give a copy of that lease to the other agent before or at execution. Okay. So I asked we got an offer, and I reminded the guy probably for the 10th time, hey, give me a copy of the lease. And he said, I can't find it. He said, well, let me ask the agent that I used to do the lease. And it was an agent before me, nothing to do with me, just so y'all know. And lo and behold, I don't know the whole story because I was getting a headache just trying to figure it out. The agent never did a lease. He never had anybody sign a lease. He had the lady move in, collected his commission, and never, ever had anybody sign a lease. So there was no lease. That was a whole nother ball of wax because the tenant didn't want to leave, but he wanted to sell the property, and the new owner, the offer that I got from the agent, they didn't want a tenant either. So it got interesting. Lord knows how he's practicing real estate with not doing it correctly. My mind was boggled. That's only one of many things this agent did that was unethical. So okay, have you owner financed but paid off? Do you have a release of lien? Okay, so that's if they had it owner financed, which is really rare. Did seller obtain title insurance when property was purchased? That's most likely going to be yes, especially if they went through a title company. And by the way, I would never sell a property. I wouldn't even sell my own mother's property without going through a title company. Will seller be furnished an existing survey? That's a great question to ask. What do you need if they give you a survey? The T-47 would be the correct answer. Notarized. Is this property in a homeowners association? Yes, most likely. Let's take a time out here and explain why that question is probably one of the most important questions you should be asking. Doesn't sound like it would be, but let's run a scenario. You're the listing agent, and you assume that the HOA the HOA transfer fee is $500. You just assume it because you saw it on HAR. Okay. And let's say at close, and so you get an offer, and the addendum, I think it's C, says the buyer will pay up to $500 for the HOA fees to do with transferring of the property at closing. And you go, cool, they're paying for all the transfer fees. And you tell your seller that. Looks like you'll make X amount of money because these are all your fees, and they're paying for the HOA transfer fee at closing. And all of a sudden you get into these new neighborhoods where they're charging a capitalization fee or a cap fee or an entrance fee or an exit fee. They disguise it all kinds of ways. Let me be clear to you that on all my listings, I call the HOA and I ask them, what are all your fees that you charge at closing? And what do you charge before closing to get the documents that we need? Here's why. I'm not going to go into this. I have a YouTube video on it, and I will give you my YouTube channel. Or right here, you can take a picture of that. Ryan Hygic 8398. Here's why. The HOA addendum says, I don't want to go into it, but it's really important. So hold on. Let me pull up my form. And we're about done. So this is actually really important. So let's go to an addendum here. Let's go to one of my files, documents, HOA. Okay. This is the way it was explained to me, and I thought it was one of the best explanations. This is not what I'm looking for. This is what I'm looking for. Okay. C is all fees. It has to be a number in here. If it's $500, it is not just the transfer fee. C is any fees due at closing associated with the HOA that charges it. So take transfer fee out of your head, because the transfer fee could be $300. And what if the capital is, let's say in this instance, the transfer fee is $500 and the capitalization fee is $1,000. Who's going to be left paying the $1,000 in this situation? In this situation, this situation, who's going to be stuck paying the $1,000? I'll tell you the answer. Your seller, because the buyer capped it at $500. You're saying, wait a minute, the capitalization fee is not a transfer fee. I don't care. It's all fees. Read the paragraph. Buyer shall pay any and all associated deposits, reserves, and other charges associated with the transfer of the property. That includes the capitalization fee. It's because it's at closing. So C is all the fees due by the HOA at closing, except for obviously the HOA monthly dues. That's not included in this, but it's all the extras. I call them the HOA greedy, the greed. Okay. D, you're thinking, well, I'm covered because D says buyer. No, you're not. D is all the fees associated with documents that the HOA or the title company may need to get before closing, like the resale certificate they may need before closing. And that's negotiated here. But at closing, Stacy, one of our mentors, she told me that there was a $10,000 fee due by the HOA at closing. $10,000. Aren't you glad? Isn't she glad she knew that up front? So again, if this has $500 in it and you're representing the seller, then you might be paying some of that out of your commission if you didn't know that. So I always call the HOA whenever I take on every single listing of mine. I know it's a pain in the butt, but would you rather spend $1,000 or more out of your commission at closing for one phone call? Because it's happened before to other agents. I've heard about it. Is there more than one HOA? And of course, you need to know that. Please call your HOA to tell them you're selling your home. Ask for a list of their fees right here. I didn't even know that was on here. And look, it reminds you, are you a U.S. citizen? And let me go over the last two items and then we'll be wrapping it up. Are you a U.S. citizen? Why is that so important to ask, even though that might be awkward? Because there is a foreign tax if they fall into a certain qualification. And if they're not a U.S. citizen, you can still sell a house. You can still buy a house. But when you sell a house, the tax could be 30, 40%. And that's not on the profit. That's on the entire amount of the house. So if it's a $300,000 house at 30%, you do the math. That's a lot of money. So yeah, if they answer yes, then you send that to the title company and you highlight that and you ask them to check in to see if they're going to have to pay a foreign tax. Because if it ends up being $60,000 foreign tax, they may not want to sell the property. But wouldn't you rather find that out now than putting it on MLS and then at closing and now they're stuck? They're stuck. And then they're going to, I don't care who you are. They're going to put the blame on you because you didn't ask them this question. Are you a US citizen? And that actually almost happened to me. They end up not being able to because they didn't meet they were a foreigner, but they met the parameters to not have to pay the tax. And those parameters I'm not going to go over. That's for the title company as lawyer to figure out or not, or their lawyer. Exclusions. That's when you take them back. This is when you take them back around the property and you say, listen, guys, anything that's attached to the property that you want to keep, almost every time their knee-jerk reaction is no. You can have it all. That is not an acceptable answer to me. I get off the table and I say, let's walk around your house and let me explain to you what exactly this means. I say, those blinds. Nope, I don't want them. What about grandma's curtains? Actually, grandma did give them to me and we'd like to keep them. Well, that's an exclusion. And if you don't put it on the contract or make sure you counter that back with the buyer's agent or put it on HAR and make sure, I always put an exclusions list on my HAR under attachments because I want to make it, and that still doesn't mean it's contractual. It just means I want the buyer's agent to make sure they put that in the contract. And if they miss it, it's your job to make sure it's on there. It could be anything. It could be a barbecue pit that's attached to the ground. I had an instance come up where I had this filled out and they did not tell me that they wanted their light fixture above their dining room table. Guess what? It wasn't on the contract. They didn't tell me that that was an exclusion. They told me that they wanted that fixture, and they were adamant about it, and I mean super adamant about it. It was a $600 Crate and Barrel fixture. But if I messed up and didn't ask for them for this list right here, and I didn't have something in writing with their own handwriting on it, guess who probably would have paid $600 out of his commission for a Crate and Barrel shiny new fixture? Me. Even though I verbally said it or asked them or walked them around the house, verbal doesn't mean jack. Y'all know this. So, but I went back to this list and I said, but you didn't write it on here. And we talked about it, remember? And you didn't write it on here. And I resent them a copy of this via email. And they said, yeah, we didn't tell you. And I said, but I don't know what you don't tell me. So it's not my fault. I'm sorry, guys. As upset as you are, I understand, but it wasn't my fault. And sorry, guys, I don't know about y'all. I don't pay for stuff that's not my fault. But what if I didn't have this? Little bit of lessons learned, guys. I haven't. Are y'all learning from my 20 years of doing this? That how important this is, especially those last three things. By the way, if you need if you want a copy of this, you can ask Holly, or you can just email me and ask me for it. My email is ryanhijic@yahoo.com. And this is my YouTube channel. Okay, so you're saying, what, Ryan, what about all the other things like lock boxes and all that stuff? Well, I've got a pre-listing guide on my YouTube channel, so I'm not going to go into that too much. It's actually me at a listing and I'm showing you what I physically do. It's pretty cool. It's on my YouTube channel. I'm trying to plug my YouTube channel, can y'all tell? No laughs. I don't get any laughs. It's too late, huh? So this is actually a residential listing checklist. And let me check chats real quick, make sure y'all don't have any. When the volume's low. Sorry about that. I just saw that. Have y'all all been able to hear me? QR code, TV on the wall. Okay, so let me answer some of these questions. Sorry if my volume was low. I don't know how that was happening. Everybody can hear me? Thumbs up. Wave your hand. We're good. Okay. Okay. Let me answer some of these questions in the chat here in just a minute. Yes, I will get the QR code back up. Here's my YouTube channel. Let me put the QR code back up for the Facebook. I think that's what you were wanting. Okay, so this residential listing checklist, you don't need to email me for it. You can find it in your zip forms, your dot loop, or your transaction desk. It is called residential listing checklist. And I use this checklist to this day, 20 years later, because it's asking for, it tells you all the forms, information from the seller, and then it's kind of giving you a rundown of what you should have done or before you went to their house or do afterwards. I'm not going to go over this because we're told to keep this pretty short, but a residential listing checklist, you can find it on your Texas Realtors, on your zip forms loop. Write that down. Residential listing checklist. I still use it to this day. Believe it or not, I have gotten halfway to a client's house and forgot my Supra or my sign. I've done both. Reminds me when I was a teenager and I worked for Pizza Hut, and every time it was funny because when we forgot the 2-liter Coke that came with the pizza, us drivers had to go back and get it and deliver it, and we didn't get the tip, or Pizza Hut didn't pay us for that because that was on us. So kind of reminds me of I'm 39. That was like 20 something years ago, but still, you don't ever forget when you make a mistake, right? Okay, let's go over these. QR code, here it is. Email this form. If you send me an email, I'll be glad. I'll send my email in the type to send you this form. This is my email. Okay, I'm a bit low. Okay, TV on the wall. Yes, a TV. Oh, absolutely. It should be listed as an exclusion. If it's attached to the mount that's attached to the wall, yes, in my opinion, and I'm almost positive I'm right about this, it should be listed as an exclusion, or it goes with the house because the TV is mounted to the mount that's mounted to the wall. So therefore it's attached. Absolutely. So that would need to be on the exclusions on the contract. Just because it's on the exclusions on MLS or your listing agreement does not mean that you're covered. It has to be on the 1-4 contract on the exclusions. Y'all got that? What is the foreign tax? It is if someone is not a U.S. citizen, they might have their permit to work here. I'm not super familiar with it. It's only come up a handful of times with me, but it's where they're still allowed to buy a house. They're still allowed to work. They just don't have their U.S. citizenship, and the country that they're from will charge a tax when they sell a house if they fall under certain guidelines. So, and it's very steep. The tax is 30 or 40%. Very informative. Thank you. I heard Ryan Hydrick. Okay, so unmute yourself and fire off questions or type them in the chat because I got the chat pulled up. Anything and everything. If you discovered a walkthrough, okay, so the question is, if you discovered a walkthrough on day of closing, what next? Okay, thanks, 30 to 40%. Yeah, foreign tax, yep. So I think the question is, if you discovered that the TV was missing, okay, well then your buyer doesn't doesn't go to closing until it's fixed. Once you sign that, it's too late. Yep. So either okay, so I had an instance where I was doing a walkthrough and there was a paint chip on the wall. It was like they scuffed it moving their couch out. It was small. It was like this small. And my buyer says, aren't they going to fix this? And the seller was out of town. The seller was nowhere. I think they weren't even in the country. And I said, okay, we can. I agree that if I go through the pictures and I see that was not there, and that's not normal wear and tear because they obviously scuffed it moving it out. But do you want to hold up closing for a 2-inch by 2-inch square that needs to be repainted? Because I'm not allowed to paint it. I don't own the property and I'm not a painter. I'm just a realtor. And if you get out the paintbrush, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because you're going to end up dripping paint somewhere and you're not a painter and that's not your liability. So the seller needs to do it, but the seller was in another country. So I said, we can delay closing, but still you're their realtor. You need to give them their options. So in this particular case, I would say the TV's gone. I would call the listing agent, say TV's gone. Well, and then they're going to argue, well, that's not an exclusion. I'm going to say, well, it was attached to the mount that was attached to the wall. Usually I would bring that up in an email well before this happened with the listing agent, just to clarify. Okay. But let's say the TV's gone. It has happened to me before. or TVs or something attached is gone. Well, the listing agent, I would call the listing agent and say, we need to rectify this. And if the seller says, well, we don't have time to go to Best Buy and get a TV and remount it, what is it going to take? I would ask my seller, what is it going to take? How much does that TV cost? I don't know. Let's look it up. Let's go to, Sam's Club and .com and look up how much that thing costs, or Best Buy. And then I would get the seller to give my buyer a credit at closing, and then the CD would have to be changed, but I understand that. But if it's a big deal, and it's probably going to be a big deal, especially something like a TV, then you have to rectify before your buyer signs. Once your buyer signs, it's his house. Like it or not, he lost that TV. And if you didn't tell him that, and he thinks he's going to get a TV delivered to him later, I mean, then he signed, and you can't promise or make anybody do that after that. So so that's why it's important. Okay, so the other thing is fridges. Fridges are a big and I'll open up back up to questions after this. Fridges are important. Fridges do not come with the property. Do not come with the property unless they're built-in fridges. So if you don't do a non-realty item addendum and write fridge in the kitchen, all of a sudden you do your walkthrough, you were asking, and the fridge isn't there. I'm sorry, but that's on you. You didn't write the fridge into the addendum if that's what they wanted. They wanted the fridge. Now, if your clients knew the fridge didn't come with it and you explain that to them, then of course you can't, make someone give a fridge when the seller doesn't want it, want to convey it. But if it was assumed that they get the fridge and you didn't write it in a non-realty item addendum, it's happened to me. So we walked back, we walked into the house, did the walkthrough, and the fridge was gone. I swear this happened to me. And I said, man, did I put that in the non-realty item addendum? And I looked back at my file and on my laptop, and I did not write it in the non-realty item addendum, and the fridge was gone. So I paid for it. Oops is right. Washer and dryer is not part of the sale either. That would have to be included in the non-realty item addendum. And by the way, on the non-realty item addendum, I took a CE class, and you're not allowed to write 0 at the top like we all used to do. You have to put a dollar amount. So usually I put $1, and then I write fridge and kitchen. I always describe, because there could be a fridge in the garage. You technically need the serial number, model number, but most people don't do that. I write $1, fridge and kitchen, washer and dryer, and laundry room. As cheesy as that is, the more descriptive you can be, the better. And then if the fridge was gone, I would call the listing agent, tell them to refer back to the non-realty item addendum and bring the fridge back or pay for a new one. And sometimes the seller, to avoid any kind of delay, they might say, well, look, here's a receipt. We ordered one from Home Depot. It's going to be delivered XYZ. And if your seller and your buyer is comfortable with that receipt, then you move forward. You close. It's to do with you have to hash it out between you and the listing agent. If your buyer is comfortable with that, or they, write them a check at closing. I mean, technically the HUD should disclose all monies, but sometimes you've got to do what you got to do, especially if it's like an appliance, then you're just transferring and selling an appliance at that point. So, remember your exclusions and remember your non-realty item addendums. Those are going to cost you a commission in the future. Questions? You can type it or unmute yourself and ask. I'm going to